Colleagues, let me call you to order, everyone. My name is Bob Ray. I'm the Vice President of the ASP for a few more days. And I'm acting as your chairman this morning. We're going to call the meeting to order, if you don't mind. Thank you. We're going to deal, first of all, with the issue of credentials. It should go fairly quickly. Item 7, credentials of representatives of states at the 22nd session. In accordance with Rule 25 of the Rules of Procedure, Credentials Committee, consisting of representatives of 9 states parties, shall be appointed each session. At the first plenary meeting on the 4th of December, the Assembly appointed 8 members of the Credentials Committee. At its 12th meeting, the Bureau recommended that the Assembly appoint Argentina as the 9th member. May I take it the Assembly agrees to appoint Argentina as the 9th member of the Credentials Committee? Seeing no objection, it is so decided. We're now going to turn to the issue of the budget, considerations and adoption of the budget for the 22nd financial year. We will first hear from the registrar, Mr. Osvaldo Zavalla Aguilar, and then a presentation by the chair of the Committee on Budget and Finance, better known as CBF, Mr. Bernard Drummel. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. It's much appreciated. So I will draw your attention to the documentation before the Assembly, in particular the following documents. The proposed program budget of the ICC for 2024, which is document ICC/ASP/22/10, the report of the Committee on Budget and Finance and the work of its 40th session, document ICC-ASP/22/5, the report of the Committee on Budget and Finance and the work of its 41st session, document ICC-ASP22/15, and the report of the Committee on Budget and Finance and the work of its 42nd session, document ICC-ASP/22/20. Additional relevant documentation is indicated in the annotated list of items on the provisional agenda, ICC-ASP/22/1, add.1. I now invite the registrar of the court, Mr. Osvaldo Zavalla Aguilar, to present the court's proposed program budget for 2024. In so doing, I would like to say to the registrar that he has taken on this job at a challenging time. There's never not been a challenging time for the court, but he's taken on at a particularly challenging time because of the events and situations which he's already described to member states. On behalf of the presidency, I want to express my appreciation to him and now give him the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, Your Excellency, Vice President of the Assembly of States Parties, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It is my honor to address this Assembly in my capacity as Registrar of the International Criminal Court. While this 22nd session of the Assembly of States Parties is my first as Registrar, my first session of the ASP was at the 4th session in 2005, when I participated as a delegate for the Coalition of the International Criminal Court. Later on, I joined the court itself and have worked for the court ever since. During this time, I have seen with my own eyes the ICC mature into an international institution of considerable relevance for the international community as a whole. I have seen its mandate permeate the structures and the processes that sustain international peace, security, and justice. The success of this institution is something I am wholeheartedly committed to, and I will continue to serve the court with my utmost dedication and skill. That success, of course, can only be realized thanks to you, the states parties. This is your court. You have created this institution and you sustain it. And the court is grateful for your political, financial, and other support and cooperation throughout all these years. In this regard, I would like to join others before me in welcoming Armenia as a 124th state party to the Rome Statute. Armenia's ratification is another testament to the court's continuing relevance in addressing impunity for atrocity crimes. I have seen a clear need for a paradigm shift. We are on the cusp of a new era that brings with it new challenges, in particular in the area of security for the court and the threat to its independence. We are operating now in a much more aggressive environment than the one when the court was established 25 years ago, carried at the time by the almost unanimous international momentum for accountability and progress. Because when that abstract pledge to accountability is being turned into reality, challenges and oppositions arise. The court experienced it a few years ago when it was subject to coercive measures, and it is experiencing even more threatening circumstances today. The new environment is pushing us, the court, to change and to look into re-evaluating existing risks and seriously examining new ones. Today, the court is being targeted. Its operations, its officials, and those collaborating with its mandate are being targeted. Arrest warrants against the prosecutor and a number of ICC judges, including the president, have been issued. The court was subject to an unprecedented cyber attack a couple of months ago, the consequences of which are still with us today and will be for the foreseeable future. Last year, the court prevented, with the help of the host state, a serious attempt to infiltrate by a hostile state agent. On our part, the court and the registry have been taking stronger, more focused, and more strategic efforts to change. Thanks in large part to the independent expert review, we have re-examined our processes and made a number of significant improvements in different areas. We have made efforts in improving our workplace culture, including through the introduction of two new important functions in the court, the ombuds and the focal point for gender equality. Earlier this year, for the first time in the history of the court, 4 strategic plans of the court, of the registry, of the Office of the Prosecutor, and of the Trust Fund for Victims were closely coordinated and published at the same time. Mr. Vice President, as I have indicated, we work for an organization that has gone through profound changes in its visibility, its overall impact, and as such, its risks. The culture of the organization has grown and has to change to fit into its new environment. But such efforts require guidance, vision, and purpose. The challenges ahead, the challenges today, entail responsibility for those of us leading the institution to set the tone, to lead by example, and to do so with clarity, meaning, and intent. Both geographical representation and gender balance are a matter of legitimacy for the court. The court serves the international community's pursuit of justice and accountability. The court thus must be reflective of and fostered by the values, principles, and rich experiences of the international community that constitutes it, of the different legal systems of the world. And it must do so with due regard to diversity of its workforce more broadly, including a balanced gender representation at all levels of its hierarchy. The composition of the court's personnel and the way that composition is perceived has a direct impact on the credibility of the institution and its operations. We are adapting ourselves to the new era, and we have taken a more strategic approach to make this institution more agile, more efficient, and more legitimate. Together with the President and the Prosecutor, and after a thorough consultation with our staff and personnel, we will be launching the core-wide ICC core values early next year. I consider the core values of the court as a platform that must allow the personnel and the organization itself to model behavior, aspirations, and expectations to principles that are organic to our culture. But it is also important that the organization also crafts values that reflect both the court's long-term aspirations and its foundations. Indeed, the selection of the core values should be done with endurance in mind. As such, while addressing and reflecting on present challenges is essential, our values should also possess a timeless quality. Our work continues, and we cannot do it alone. We are in the middle of the novel challenges. Security is a fundamental, existential issue. Security is important not only because the court is ensuring the safety of our witnesses, of our operations, of those collaborating with the court, and of its officials and personnel. It is also important because the ability of the court to work in a secure manner is essential to its judicial independence. Lack of security impedes the proper implementation of the court's mandate and delegitimizes the institution. So while the court is painfully aware of the new paradigm shift that is taking place, we need you, the states parties, to be fully aware of this shift too. We need you to enhance the court's capabilities to fulfill its mandate, as well as its defenses against outside threats. The relationship between the court and its states parties is based on trust. Your trust in the court's ability to fulfill its mandate in an efficient, independent, and impartial manner, and our continued trust in you, the states parties, that enable us to do so. Mr. Vice President, the court proposed 204 million euros for the proposed program budget for 2024, representing an increase of 27.18 million euros, or 15.7% over the approved budget for 2023 of 173.2 million euros. Of this total increase, approximately 15.6 million euros correspond to fund new requirements across various investigations, trials, and judicial activities, while 11.6 million corresponds to unavoidable inflationary pressures, including the increases in the UN Common System costs. In 2024, resources are needed to run and support trial hearings and the corresponding workload in 3 cases throughout the year: the Abdel al-Rahman case, the Yekato Manengalzona case, and the Said case, as well as in the Al-Hassan case in the beginning of the year. The Office of the Prosecutor is expected to carry out active investigations in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Darfur, Libya, Palestine, Philippines, Ukraine, and Venezuela. The Trust Fund for Victims will be even more active in 2024 than this year. It will continue implementing reparation programs in the Lubanga and the Al-Mahdi cases, and will start full reparation programs stage also in the Ntaganda case, and commence the process for the reparations in the Ongwen case. Importantly, early next year, the Trust Fund will conclude the first ever full implementation of reparations in the Katanga case. I fully recognize that these demands have led to a request for a substantial increase, but I can assure you that they have come only after all measures have been taken to first and foremost find savings, efficiencies, and reductions to our budget, as well as a reprioritization of our resources. In the registry alone, the total reductions amounted to approximately 5.3 million euros. Considering the court's request for 2024, the Committee on Budget and Finance recommended a net increase of 15.15 million euros, or 8.7%, compared to 2023 approved budget of 173.2 million. Among the recommended reductions, the committee did not endorse the approval of 3 million euros in expected additional UN Common System costs in 2024, nor the resources requested to ensure the security of our operations. Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we have a shared responsibility to ensure a sustainable future for the court. The court's responsibility, my responsibility, is to put forward to you the requirements of the court to carry out its important mandate, after all measures to find savings and efficiencies have been taken. We have done that. Your responsibility as states parties is to carefully consider and decide on the court's requirements. And I fully recognize that in the current economic and financial circumstances in many of our states parties, this is not an easy decision. So I thank you. My responsibility is also to ensure operational sustainability and the diligent use of the resources allocated by you. The contingency fund was established to ensure prosecutorial and judicial independence, to ensure that in the light of unforeseen developments, when new crimes need to be investigated or a new arrest warrant is implemented, the court has the resources to implement its mandate. The contingency fund is therefore much more than a reserve fund. It is directly linked to the sustainability of judicial and prosecutorial independence. Mr. Vice President, before I conclude, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our ICC President, Judge Piotr Hofmanski, whose mandate will come to an end soon, for his great leadership and personally for his support in my first year as registrar. Thank you, Piotr, for having been an inspiration, a guide, and an example in responsible leadership. My congratulations to our 6 newly elected judges. I look forward to ensuring adequate support to your important work ahead. I would also like to thank the outgoing ASP President, Silvia Fernandez de Gourmendi, for her adamant and unwavering support to the court and the Rome Statute system, as well as outgoing Vice Presidents Ambassador Ray and Ambassador Sequenzova for their excellent work and coordination in New York and in The Hague, respectively. My congratulations to the newly elected ASP President, Ambassador Caucuranta, as well as the 2 new Vice Presidents, Ambassador Kasangana and Ambassador Kanu. My special thanks go to the budget facilitator, Ambassador Milenkovic, for the productive cooperation, skillful leadership, and the many efforts in addressing multiple and complex budgetary issues, as well as to Ambassador Drummond for the important work done by the Committee on Budget and Finance. And last but not least, my congratulations to the newly elected CBF members with whom I look forward to working in the coming years. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the challenges the court faces are serious and threatening. Often, it is with hindsight that we can evaluate our decisions. But if history is what we will tomorrow think of today, responsibility is what we today think of tomorrow. I am confident that this Assembly will make the right decisions for the future of your court and of your Rome Statute system. I thank you.
I want to thank the Registrar very much for his intervention and for his report. And I now give the floor to the Chair of the Committee on Budget and Finance, Ambassador Bernard Rummel. Bernard, the floor is yours.
Mr. Vice President, thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to address you today and to present the main outcomes of our discussions at the 41st and the 42nd session of the CBF. At the outset, I would like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow colleagues from the committee for their devotion and hard work during this year, and also to the representatives of the court for their availability and cooperation. My thanks and appreciation goes also to the Executive Secretary, to the CBF and his team for their quality and outstanding support, which is essential for the fulfillment of the committee's mandate. Let me start with some of the challenges the court will be facing in 2024. First, United Nations Common System and inflation. The committee recognized that the increase of staff costs by the UNCS and inflation will impact unavoidably the court's future obligations towards its staff and various contracting partners, and concurred with the court that some kind of prevention should be established. Currently, those increases are absorbed in the approved budget, resulting in the budget being inflated to allow that absorption. The committee was of the opinion that a reserve for UNCS increases could bring more transparency and thus more trust into the budgeting process. However, the committee was not convinced by the proposal to change the salary increases, to charge the salary increases decided by the ICSC costs to the contingency fund, and requested the court to provide a report on the issue of financial risks deriving from the UNCS increases, including the proposal for a reserve fund at its 44th session in April 24. In addition to the already certain increases, the court has, however, proposed an additional estimated increase of 2.9 million for salaries for 24. As these costs are not yet certain, the committee recommended that the Assembly not approve the additional increase of 2.9 million. Second, contingency fund. The contingency fund currently has a cash balance of 2.2 million. A notification for an amount of 2.3 million was recently received by the committee. These expenses will be absorbed by the regular budget as has been assured by the registry at the end of this year. The committee continues, however, to be of the view that state parties should replenish the contingency fund to its notional level of 7 million to provide the court with the flexibility to react to unforeseen situations. Third, liquidity. The outlook for the liquidity of the court has significantly improved, and there may be no liquidity shortfall in 2023. That improvement, however, was due to a major payment of areas at the beginning of the year and is only sustainable if states parties pay their contributions to the court's budget in full and on time. Fourth, security. Security is, as much as the IT area, a cross-cutting issue all over the institution. The registry had calculated for the proposed program budget an amount of 1.6 million in security requirements. The requested resources aiming to make substantial improvements to the court security systems and should have an impact on the operation of the institution and its technological security, including by providing protection to all actors involved at headquarters, country offices, and during investigation-related activities. In this context, IT security is key. Most of the court's operations are fully IT dependent. A failure in the systems or a security breach could potentially shut down the court's operations. Cybersecurity has therefore been a particular focus of attention in the committee's consideration of the IT-related budget items. The cybersecurity incident, which happened after the committee's autumn session, very much underlined the risks and the impact on the court's operations. As we understand, the IT architecture needs a redesign to reinforce the institutional resilience in the face of the increasing security risks. According to the registrar, substantial additional resources are being required. The intention of the registrar is to establish a trust fund on security with a total of 70 million, I understand, to receive voluntary contributions to improve the court security, including the reinforcement of physical facilities, strengthening of digital infrastructure, and prevention of strengthening the protection of sensitive information, both in headquarters and in country offices. The committee will specifically deal with security issues related to the establishment of the trust fund at its 44th session in April 2024. Fifth, OTP Trust Fund for advanced technology and specialized capacity. The committee noted that total contribution received or pledged to the trust fund amounted to about 22 million received from state parties, including the contribution of 7.2 from the European Commission, among which 5.1 million had already been spent and 8.1 million was allotted. The OTP Trust Fund has been operational for now the second year now. Its activities have been supplementary to the court's core activities. It has allowed the OTP to address challenges, in particular with respect to the harnessing of advanced technology, improvements which would have become necessary anyway, without seeking additional resources in the program budget. And also this, whilst most of the support services of the court can provide assistance to the trust fund activities within existing capacities, it is clear that it had an impact on the regular budget. Furthermore, other trust funds, such as on complementarity and cooperation, have been announced. However, no concrete proposals yet have been received by the committee. Sixth, secondment of personnel. The committee was informed that as of September 23, the OTP had 60 national experts on secondment from 19 states parties, including 20 investigators, 6 lawyers, 5 prosecutors, 10 analysts, and other specialists. Currently, 13 different unified teams presently benefit from secondees, as well as a number of specialized thematic teams. The court has received an indication of the possibility of extension or replacement for 25 secondees in 2024. The committee was also informed by the OTP that the OTP will transit its request for secondments to more specialized technical fields in support of its analytical activities, and that a new note verbal outlining these new requirements will be circulated to states parties. As for the impact of the secondees, the increased onboard procedures, medical clearance and training have created additional work and cost for the court, especially related to the registry. The committee recommended to mitigate negative impacts, but also to profit from a knowledge transfer between secondees and the court. The committee also recommended that the court consider the possibility of taking the support costs of about 13%, so that not only on this, but also maybe on future funds, so that the registry could also benefit and impact and mitigate the impact of such funds. Seventh, legal aid reform. The committee reviewed the second reform proposal on legal aid and received presentations from both the court and the International Criminal Court Bar Association on its various aspects, such as working conditions and remuneration, and recommended the implementation in full of the so-called Scenario B as a minimum. The reform proposal is multifaceted and seeks to deliver a wide range of improvements. Eighth, premises. As for the premises, The committee took note of the consultant's report ICC headquarters premises assessment and elaboration capital replacement plan, which the authors presented to the committee. In light of the late presentation of the mentioned report, the court had not yet presented a report on its assessment to the committee. The committee therefore requested the court a report on its assessment of this proposed plan on the future contract setup and multi-year financing plan for its next session in spring 2024. The upkeep of the premises will remain a challenge. The commitment of state parties to reliable long-term funding will be necessary. Appropriate decisions should be taken by next year. Finally, the evaluation of the Secretariat of the ASP. The committee took note and welcomed the decision by the Bureau to have an assessment of the Secretariat that will take place in 2024. Such assessment should aim at increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of the Secretariat, taking also in consideration the specific needs and requirements of the proper functioning of the CBF and the Audit Committee. Therefore, the two committees should be consulted during this process. And finally, Mr. Vice President, consideration of the 2024 proposed program budget. The court requested a proposed program budget of 200.4 million, including the host state's loan of 3.59 million. The 2024 proposed program budget represented an increase of 15.7% or 27.2 million against the total approved budget for 2023. The committee carefully considered the budget assumptions, judicial activities, and workload, taking into consideration the pressure of inflation in prices and the previous trends in costs. The committee particularly recommended important reductions in staff resources. In assessing the need of the requested resources, the committee had to take into account various factors, such as the level of activities, the existing resources and past experiences, the secondees provided by states parties, the number of long-term vacant posts which are not under recruitment, access to extra budgetary resources by the prosecutor, and generally the very limited recruitment capacity. Even with the significant reductions in staff resources, increases in the budget will have to be expected. A budget in 2025 will have to be expected, since basically all new GTAs positions are funded only partially in 2024 for a range between 2 and 6 months, and will highly likely have to be funded at 100% in 2025. After carefully reviewing, therefore, the budget proposal and the justifications provided, the committee concluded that total reductions could be achieved in the amount of 12 million. This represents an adjusted total increase of 15.2 million or 8.7% compared to this year's budget, including the host state loan. It is worth mentioning that the total increase of 15.2 million included a total amount of 8.7 million, or 57% of the total increase, related to the unavoidable increase from the inflation and the UNCS. The committee considered that in spite of these substantive reductions, the operations of the court will not be negatively impacted. This concludes my remarks, Mr. Vice President. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Werner, for that presentation. I think it speaks to incredible dedication on the part of the committee. I think we all have to recognize that we all work as volunteers in these jobs, and they are incredibly important in assessing how the court can go forward. And there will, of course, be further opportunities for this assembly to consider issues of the budget as we continue meeting through next week. So I'm now going to turn your attention to agenda item number 17, which is consideration of the audit reports, which I draw your attention to the following documentation before the Assembly, including the financial statements of the court for the year ending on the 31st of December 2022, which is document ICC-ASP/22/12, the financial statements of the Trust Fund for Victims of the Year ended 31st December, document ICC-ASP/22/13, and the External Auditor's Performance Audit Report on Legal Aid, which is document ICC-ASP/22/38. The Assembly will also consider the reports of the Audit Committee on its 17th and 18th sessions, which are available on the website of the Assembly. And I will first give the floor to Mr. Werner Drummel, who will deliver a statement on behalf of the Chair of the Audit Committee, Mr. Faisal Chowdhury. So once again, Mr. Drummel, you're in the chair.
Thank you very much. Being also a member of the AC, I have been asked to provide this briefing. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today and to present the main outcomes of our discussions at the 17th and 18th session of the AC, of the Audit Committee. Like for the CBF, I also want to take this opportunity to reiterate my appreciation to the colleagues in the committee for their devotion and hard work, and also to the representatives of the court for their participation and valuable contributions. And I also would like to thank the Secretary to the AC and his team for their constant hard work and effective support to the committee throughout the year, upon which we rely. The 17th and 18th session were held in The Hague in March and July of this year. I will now briefly summarize the main discussions of the committee sessions. The committee focused at its two sessions on oversight of internal and external audit matters, on risk management, and on ethics. First, oversight of internal audit matters. As part of its oversight of internal audit matters, the committee discussed the audit reports of the Office of Internal Audit, OIA, the status of implementation of the 2022 and 2023 internal audit plan, work plan for the 2023 and draft work plan for next year, the annual report of the OIA on the implementation of audit recommendations in 2022, the Charter of the Office of Internal Audit, and finally, the status of selecting an external assessor for the internal audit function. The committee made a number of observations to enhance the efficiency of internal audits in the area of planning, staff deployment, and client engagement. The AC recommended that annual OIA work plans be approved by COCO on a timely basis so that the OIA can operate based on an institutionally approved plan, and noted that the approval of the OIA work plan for the 23 for this year had only been approved well into the year. The committee was informed that the draft work plan for 2024 was expected to be ready in autumn 2023. The committee suggested that the OIA maintain a multi-year rolling work plan to give a better indication of the scope of risk coverage over time and to facilitate the audit planning process. The AC noted that a significant number of audit recommendations were still outstanding. In this context, the committee reiterated the importance of tone of the top, which is generally recognized as foundational to an effective control environment. Unless there were clear signals that senior management was fully supportive of the importance of the internal audit function, collaborative execution of audit work, and a clear focus on implementing audit recommendations would not be accorded the required priority. Without this, if there were to be a significant access control breach or security incident, it would be difficult to explain and defend. The AC reviewed the OIA Charter and suggested some amendments. The AC requested that it be updated at its 19th session. The AC noted that an external assessment of OIA is planned and was briefed and consulted on the process for selection of an external assessor. The AC will monitor the external assessment process, meeting with the external assessor as needed. Second, oversight of external audit matters. As part of its oversight of external audit matters, the committee discussed the financial statements of the court for the year 22, the financial statements of the Trust Fund for Victims for the same year, and the external auditor's report on temporary personnel, legal aid, and the status of performance audit on cybersecurity. With regards to financial statements of the court for the year 2022, the committee was pleased that the external auditor has issued an unqualified audit opinion. The committee noted that the external auditor recommended that the court comprehensively review its staff regulations and rules, administrative instructions and guidelines, given that the purpose of ICC Regulation 3.1 is to be in conformity with UN regulations and rules, in order to strengthen the efficiency of the staff costs budget. The AC noted that the court did not plan to review the full set of rules, only a subset of the relevant ones. With regards to the financial statements of the Trust Fund for Victims, the committee was pleased that the external auditor has also issued an unqualified audit opinion. The opinion, the AC was, however, not convinced by the external auditor's interpretation of IPSAS 19 concerning the liability and obligations with regard to the provision established to discharge the reparation orders issued by chambers. The external auditor considered that the convicted person and the Trust Fund for Victims shared the liability created by a reparations order. the Trust Fund for Victims Management disagreed with this interpretation. The AC supported management's interpretation of the relevant accounting standard that a third party, in this case the Trust Fund for Victims, cannot assume liability that has already been legally assigned via a court order to another party, in this case the convicted. The AC urged management to continue discussions with the external auditor on this matter during the next financial statement preparation cycle. With regards to the audit report of the external auditor on legal aid, the committee noted the important deficiencies highlighted and was pleased to be informed that the registry has created a specific unit to focus on judicial cooperation, which will also focus on indigence assessment and follow-up on outstanding cooperation. The AC noted that the legal aid reform was submitted to the CBF for its consideration before it is approved by the Assembly. With regard to the audit on cybersecurity, the AC noted that the scope of the audit assignment was being discussed with the court and stressed the need for robust policies and timely implementation in this important area. Third, risk management. The AC noted that the court's overall operational risk consolidation was updated to include 200 risks in accordance with its 10th update report on risk management. In discussing the status of outstanding OIA recommendations in the context of overall risk management, the AC noted that there was a lack of clarity and consistency in the way that old outstanding items were viewed and presented. In some cases, implementation of these recommendations was still planned, but with low priority. In others, implementation was delayed because of dependency on developments in other areas. And yet in others, the recommendations were in effect rejected. No actions planned, with the implication that the associated risks were accepted and not deemed consequential. In the context of overall risk management and the seriousness with which OIA recommendations are viewed, the AC believes that there should be clarity and consistency in this area and a clear linkage to overall risk management and organizational risk appetite. While implementing a risk management process is a foundational step, the challenge is to develop a risk management culture across the organization that is consistent with the risk management appetite. The AC will continue to monitor the evolution of risk management within the organization at its future meetings. Fourth, ethics. The AC noted the further delay in issuing the ethics charter and acknowledged the registrar's involvement and the guidance provided on the next procedural steps, which is expected to be presented to principals of the court by the end of this year for validation and adoption. The AC reiterated that while ethics charter is the foundation document on which a robust ethics and internal justice system can be built, work still needs to be done to achieve this ultimate objective and should be given a high priority. The AC requested that the court submit the adopted court-wide ethics charter at its 19th session. And finally, Audit Committee Charter. The AC continued to review its charter to ensure that it reflected the current organizational context and was in line with IIA standards and best practice. Mr. Vice President, allow me to conclude by underlining that since its re-establishment, the Audit Committee has worked assiduously to be a catalyst in triggering important improvements in the areas within its mandate. We seek not only to provide an additional layer of accountability to the Assembly, but the AC has also to constructively engage with all actors in the various areas of its mandate to achieve tangible progress in the reduction of risks, the identification of risk mitigating measures, to maintain financial integrity through robust internal control and financial reporting processes, and to contribute to greater efficiency and effectiveness of the business processes of this organization. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Drummel, for your intervention. I'm now going to give the floor to the representative of the external auditor, Mr. Yang Chan Cho.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it's an honor to be here on behalf of the External Auditor. The External Auditor, Mr. Jae-hae Choi, Chair of the Board of Audit and Inspection of Korea, expresses his deep regret for not being able to make this presentation himself. In accordance with Article 12 of the Code Financial Regulations and Rules, the External Auditor conducted independent audit for financial year 2022 during 2023. I would like to give you a brief overview of the 3 audit reports which were issued in 2023 by the External Auditor. Financial statements of the ICC for the year ended 31st December 2022. Financial statement of the Trust Fund for Victims for the year ended 31st December 2022. And performance audit on legal aid. Based on the financial audit, the External Auditor believes that the accompanying financial statement present fairly in all material respects for the 2022, and audit evidence that has been obtained is sufficient and appropriate. Therefore, the External Auditor provided unmodified audit opinion on the 2022 financial statement for both the ICC and the Trust Fund for Victims. Now, I would like to address the audit report on the financial statement of the International Criminal Court for the financial year 2022. Regarding the financial performance, the total revenues increased mainly due to increase in assessed contributions and voluntary contributions from establishment of OTP Trust Fund. The total expenses increased mainly due to employee benefit expenses related to increase in staff payroll from application of revised UN salary table and post-adjustment. Overall, the deficit was reduced to 3.9 million euro in 2022. Regarding the financial position, it was found that the total asset decreased by 2.3%. The decrease was mainly from annual depreciation of property, plant, and equipment and reimbursement right of discontinued judge pension plan. On the other hand, the total liabilities decreased by 11%. The decrease was mostly from reduced employee benefit liabilities by changes in actuarial assumptions, such as increase in discount rate used. Meanwhile, the deferred revenue and accrued expenses increased, most of which is due to voluntary contribution of OTP Trust Fund deferred to 2023. Especially, this year's audit on ICC payroll was conducted in light of the following circumstances. First, the proposed program budget amount for 2023 increased sharply compared to 2022, and this huge increase was exceptionally approved by the ASP. Second, the staff cost represented 72% of the increased amount due to factors such as revised salary scale and increase in post-adjustment during 2022. Third, the outlook for the court's liquidity has significantly worsened due to outstanding contribution payment. The external auditor recommended that the court comprehensively review its step regulations and rules, administrative instructions and guidelines, considering the purpose of ICC Regulation 3.1 to be in conformity with UN step regulations and rules in order to strengthen the efficiency of step cost budget. The external auditor made this recommendation because he believed that the ASP judgment is necessary to determine whether differences in UN and ICC rules are reasonable due to the unique organizational needs, and whether the benefits brought to the ICC from these differences offset the higher step cost. Also, it was recommended that the court review its guidelines in order to strengthen the transparency and integrity of determination of step on initial recruitment and establish procedures to enhance management of education grant advances, such as specific deadlines and limitation of subsequent advances without previous unsettlement. Now, I would like to present the audit report on the financial statement of the Trust Fund for Victims, including its financial position and financial performance for its 2022 financial statement. Regarding the financial performance, Trust Fund for Victims maintained the same deficit as in 2021, with the deficit falling slightly. The main reason was that the 2022 voluntary contribution income did not exceed the program cost. The total revenue increased by 7.3% due to the increase in voluntary donations. Regarding the financial position, Trust Fund of Victims' total assets decreased due to a decline in cash and cash equivalent. Trust Fund for Victims has no financial liabilities, and the provisions related to reparation programs amount to 3.7 million euros, which is about 60% of the total liabilities, while the net asset capital decreased. The external auditor recommended implementing measures to strengthen cash internal controls to mitigate the risk of excessive cash holdings and to ensure compliance with MOD regulations. It was also recommended that, given the higher inherent risk associated with cash, Trust Fund for Victims should establish a method to directly pay compensation to the victims whenever possible. In unavoidable situations where indirect payment is necessary, written consent needs to be obtained. Additionally, since indirect cash compensation increases the related risks, the auditor advised implementing additional verification procedures. In addition, the external auditor recommended establishing a monitoring control at Trust Fund for Victims headquarters to retain physical evidence for verification procedures concerning implementing partners. Additionally, the external auditor suggested performing cross-check by having both the program manager and the field officer sign the verification report during the actual verification process. With respect to the performance audit on legal aid conducted by the external auditor during 2023, the audit covered administrative processes of legal aid system of the court, indigence assessment, counsel appointment, and budget payment of the legal aid. There have been 10 findings and 10 recommendations, mostly with the perspective of transparency, internal control, effectiveness, and cost efficiency. Regarding the indigence assessment, the external auditor reviewed whether legal aid has been provided in accordance with the ICC's regulations. It was found that, contrary to the regulations, the court was providing legal aid regardless of whether the accused was indigent or not. Furthermore, the court has not made sufficient effort to recover overpaid legal aid funds. while about 2 million euros is still remaining unrecovered. Also, indigent assessment to determine the provision of legal aid were found to be prolonged, with an average of 293 days and a maximum of 1,073 days to reach a conclusion, despite the fact that regulation of the court requires the result of such assessment to be available within 30 days from commencement of assessment, mainly due to non-cooperation from state parties in providing information. Accordingly, the external auditor recommended the court prepare measures to ensure the principle and establish clear administrative procedures and for the indigence assessment. It was also recommended for the court to actively pursue measures to recover overpaid legal aid fund and find ways to further induce cooperation from state parties in the indigence assessment process. The next area that was looked into was transparency and fairness of the council appointment process. It was found that there was insufficient internal control over the process of inclusion in the list of council and for monitoring the availability confirmation of the candidates. Accordingly, the external auditor recommended the court amend related work procedure and implement monitoring process to ensure transparency and internal control throughout the council appointment process. Lastly, the external auditor looked into whether legal aid payment was transparently managed or not. Although the legal aid budget is allocated to two commitment items referred to as Council for Defense and Council for Victims, it was found that the court has used some of the victims' budget allotment without transfer procedure to cover defense team costs over the past 5 years. In particular, in relation to the contingency fund for 2020, the court misreported the actual expenditures per commitment item to the CVF and ASP, missing 163,923 euros of victims' legal aid budget, which was actually spent in a way that benefited the defendant. Therefore, the external auditor recommended the court use the due internal process when transferring legal aid budget and to ensure accurate reporting on the actual expenditures of the legal aid budget for defense or victims respectively in the annual report, which is to be submitted to the ASP for legal aid budget transparency. I would like to conclude by mentioning that it is a great pleasure to present the audit report. The external auditor hopes that these efforts contribute to improving the performance of the court. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cho, for your intervention. I think this is something that will be continued to be discussed in the working group on the program budget this afternoon. I think in all the reports that we've heard today, we've had, I think, a very good introduction to the discussion, which will take place in the working group. And we look forward to the results of those deliberations and to the decisions that will follow to ensure full compliance with the recommendations of the auditors in the case of the audit situation, and also a fulsome discussion on budgets where we will deal with the continuing problem in life, which is that there's always more good ideas than there is money. So that's just the nature of budgetary discussions. We're going to take a brief pause to rearrange people on the podium, and we'll then turn our attention to the consideration of the report of the head of the Independent Oversight Mechanism. I want to thank our guests very much for their due diligence and fulsome help. Thank you.
You said something important.
We have a full morning. If we could take our seats. We're now going to turn to the consideration of the annual report of the head of the Independent Oversight Mechanism. We're going to hear a presentation on the annual report of the head of the IOM, which covers the period from the 1st of October 22 to the 30th of September 23. This report has been issued as Assembly Document ICC-ASP/22/21. We're delighted that we have the head of the Independent Oversight Mechanism, Mr. Saklen Hederali, who's going to introduce the annual report. Mr. Hederali, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. C'est un immense.
It is a great honor for me to present to the Assembly today the annual report of the Independent Oversight Mechanism. I wish, first and foremost, to thank the outgoing presidency of the Assembly for its support to the mechanism, both here in New York under your leadership, Vice President, as well as in The Hague under the leadership of Her Excellency Katerina Sekinsova. I also wish to extend particular thanks to the President of the Assembly, Ms. Silvia Fernandez de Gourmandi, for her availability and her unwavering support for the mechanism's work. This work has always been carried out without her ever interfering in the mechanism's mandate. I hope that the mechanism will enjoy the same level of support from the new presidency.
Mr. Vice President, this is my last session of the Assembly as the head of the IOM. Allow me to also reflect as I go along on these 5 years as the head of the IOM and the evolution of the function since I took office on 1st of November 2018. When I first arrived, the regulatory framework of the court was lacking. Since then, the IOM has supported this Assembly in revising the operational mandate of the IOM in 2020, has been instrumental in assisting the court in adapting its new internal regulations with respect to investigations, disciplinary proceedings, discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment, abuse of authority, and is now finalizing a new whistleblower protection policy and anti-retaliation policy. Together, these new and revised instruments have more fully integrated the IOM in the regulatory framework of the court, making it more robust and, more importantly, more fit for purpose. Some gaps, however, Mr. Vice President, still remain. For instance, the accountability regime for elected officials is still largely untested. And the role of the IOM in this system has recently come under attack. The amendments to Rule 26 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence adopted 5 years ago are now being called into question in some parts. It goes without saying that principle of judicial independence, of prosecutorial independence, form the cornerstone of any effective judicial system based on the rule of law. It is my firm belief, however, that accountability cannot be sacrificed at the altar of independence, allowing it to be abused and used as a shield against allegations of, for instance, fraud, bullying, sexual harassment, or abuse of the great power vested in elected officials. A court designed to combat impunity externally cannot do so credibly if it lacks accountability internally. Excellencies, in addition to investigations of misconduct, accountability is also provided through the IOM's evaluation function, which provides a different type of accountability by focusing on learning and continuous improvement. Despite its modest resources, the IOM has, in the last 5 years, been asked to conduct evaluation of most of the court's major programs. Even more importantly, in that time, the evaluation function of the IOM has gone from being an unknown often misunderstood function, with some even suggesting its elimination, to now being recognized for the value that it can bring to the court, with requests being made by both state parties and all three organs of the court. Excellencies, in addition to the functions found in the IOM operational mandate, we have also carried some additional ones, most notably providing support in the design and implementation of unprecedented due diligence processes for elections of court officials. In 2021, the IOM designed and implemented the first such process for the election of deputy prosecutors. This was followed the next year by a process for the election of the registrar. And finally, this year, the IOM conducted the first due diligence process for the Assembly's judicial elections, which occurred earlier this week. Each process built upon the previous one. Despite the demands of the limited IOM resources, I was grateful for the trust given to the IOM in these important processes, which now culminated in the proposal before this session of the Assembly for the establishment of a permanent due diligence process. This should not be the end, however, but the beginning. This process will undoubtedly be further refined as we move towards its implementation. But, Mr. Vice President, this due diligence process should also not be viewed as a panacea to address some of the issues plaguing the workplace culture of the court as identified by the independent expert review, or indeed by the IOM itself in its 2022 evaluation of the workplace culture in the judiciary. There is a gap that remains between the substantive assessment of the qualification and competencies of the candidates that are carried out, for example, by the Advisory Committee on Nominations for Judges, and the due diligence process, which focuses on whether these candidates had engaged in misconduct in the past. I hope that our colleagues from civil society who are instrumental in advocating for the due diligence process will also turn their attention in making sure that these assessments are strengthened to make sure that they take into account leadership skills, management skills, and that the candidates who are nominated share the values of the court. And hopefully this assessment will lead to the election of the most qualified candidates to these important positions. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the IOM is a subsidiary body of the Assembly. But more than that, and despite what some may sometimes think of the court, it is a friend of the court. It is a friend of this Assembly. It is, however, a critical friend, and it must be a critical friend, as this is its statutory role. Like any good friend, it is here to provide open and frank feedback and advice to it, even if this is not what they may want to hear. Like in any friendship, there can be disagreements. And when the advice that is provided by the OM is not received in the spirit of friendship in which it is given, even if the response at time may even be hostile, this does not deter us. Because our friendship is not to any particular elected official, any particular organ, or any particular delegation. It is to the court, to this Rome Statute system, and to the values that it represents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hederali, for your report. I'd now like to ask if any delegation would like to take the floor at this stage. I see none. Is there one there? No. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to note that this Assembly session will be the last for Mr. Hederali in his very important role as the head of the Independent Oversight Mechanism. I want to thank him on behalf of the Assembly for his dedication and his commitment to his role over the past 5 years. I've had the pleasure of working closely with him on some difficult and challenging issues which require good judgment, a great deal of independence, but also a strong understanding of the work that the court does in every respect. I particularly want to thank him for the development of the due diligence processes for elected officials, in addition to the usual and sensitive and heavy workload of the IOM. I listened very carefully to your comments about the need to improve some of the issues of accountability. I hope we will have a further opportunity to discuss those because I think they are critically important. But I do want to express my strong appreciation to you personally for your assistance, for your help, and for your leadership. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
I thank you a great deal for your leadership and the quality of your work and the major contribution that you have made now for a long time to the work that you've done. You've contributed to the process. Indeed, you've greatly improved our internal processes. And your contribution has been very important to that realm indeed. I'm deeply thankful to you.
Pause as we go into the cooperation plenary. And I will talk myself out of a job as the moderator, although I'll be making some comments on the 25th anniversary. But we're now going to turn to the plenary, and we'll bring up our other guests. And merci, thank you, Saklan. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Oui, je vais commencer et puis je vais...
I'm going to begin. I will then give you the floor. Colleagues, good morning. We will resume with a different agenda. It will be a plenary on cooperation, reflections on 25 years of cooperation. I would like to recall you that this meeting has been convened pursuant to the decision of the Assembly that was adopted during the 11th session, whereby the Assembly noted with satisfaction that it was necessary to inscribe cooperation as a permanent item on the agenda in future sessions of the Assembly. The Assembly organizes this plenary in order to continue highlighting on an annual basis how important more effective cooperation is among states. This is in order to support the Court in the fulfillment of its mandate. I will participate, but I would like to wish to all of you a very productive discussion. It is also a real pleasure to be able to participate in the first segment of this plenary with my distinguished colleagues at the Court. I will now give this plenary session, I will hand it over to the highly skilled co-facilitators for cooperation, Ambassador Lebrun and Ambassador Guillet, who will make some introductory remarks for this segment that is focused on such important issues for the successful work of the Court. Over to you.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, distinguished Vice President, for having opened this session. Ministers, Vice President, President, the Assistant Prosecutor, the Registrar of the Court, Ambassadors, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, on my behalf and on behalf of my colleague, the Ambassador of Senegal, to the Netherlands, Mamargueye, who unfortunately was unable to join us today. He's replaced by Ambassador Nyamandom, who's next to me. I would like to wish each and every one of you a warm welcome to this plenary on cooperation at this session of the Assembly of States Party. It's a real pleasure to be with you today at this plenary in this facilitation that France and Senegal have been leading for 7 years now. And it is for us a real honor to contribute to efforts to mobilize states and encourage them to cooperate with the International Criminal Court pursuant to our duties as states parties, and in a way that it is clearly necessary for the Court, which cannot work and cannot fulfill its duties without that cooperation. And particularly, in light of the challenges that it is facing now. Our session will include 2 segments. A first segment will allow us to listen to a series of statements from high-level participants who will provide us perspectives on 25 years after the adoption of the statute. And I would like to thank the various personalities who have accepted this opportunity to present their perspectives. We will also listen to some statements that will supplement those, and the second segment will be a more technical and practical segment that will be focused on a very important issue for us, arrests, particularly. Without further delay, I will begin this first segment, and I will give the floor to the various guests who will speak, beginning with you, the Vice President of the Assembly. I give you the floor once again.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
President Obmaski, Deputy Prosecutor Nyang, Registrar, Excellencies, Ambassadors, Co-Chairs, Co-Facilitators for Cooperation. I've been asked to speak on behalf of the President of the ASP on the achievements and perspectives of the Rome Statute in the last 25 years and how we can collectively strengthen and promote cooperation with the International Criminal Court and between states. I think it's important to stress that after the historic adoption of the Rome Statute, which really came in a very particular moment in our history since 1945, because up until the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, it was difficult to imagine our ability to create new breakthroughs for the United Nations and for the world and the global system. And the Rome Statute came within that period of 15 years where we were able to do a lot globally. And I think we all have to recognize that when the Rome Statute was negotiated, when it was signed, there were enormous sort of hopes and expectations as to the era which we would be entering. And of course, we've discovered the challenges that we are now living in a world where atrocities are multiplying and where the hard-won achievements to really assure an order that is based on the rule of law. There are some who would say, well, that's all fading away. We're not living in that world. And sometimes people wonder if it would be possible to create the court today. As interesting as that question might be, I think it's important for us to note what the court has been able to do in some of the most difficult circumstances. Because in fact, the court has consolidated the foundations for a global justice system. It has reaffirmed the obligation to investigate and to prosecute. We find that more and more states are now willing to exercise jurisdiction over international crimes, and initiatives are multiplying to provide justice or to assist those who can do so by establishing mechanisms for the collection and the preservation of evidence. I would point to the fact that we have several mechanisms at work today which are gathering evidence at an unprecedented level of detail and level of sophistication of abuses and crimes. I would note Syria, I would note Myanmar as examples where, although there are still no prosecutions before the ICC, that doesn't mean there isn't a very real and deep acceptance of the need to find evidence and to deal with those who've committed terrible crimes. We have better instruments of cooperation to facilitate interstate cooperation for the investigation and prosecution of core crimes. I think it's fair to say that we're seeing the emergence above and beyond the ICC of a global justice ecosystem within which international and national courts clearly have a role to play. And we think that this court and the Assembly must join forces with all those that are involved in justice efforts to help us to consolidate and to improve the system. So, in light of all that we've done, and I've just listed a few, the question is not, would it be possible to create the court today? Rather, the question is, how do we keep on going to strengthen the system? Not to look back on Rome and say, well, what did they imagine would happen, and then say, how terrible it is that we weren't able to do all the things we wanted to, but rather is to understand that we are actually building something, that we are actually part of a broad movement of creating the institutions that are necessary for the establishment of peace and security and justice. And the occasion of this 25th anniversary gives us an opportunity to do that. And we've been doing it. This has been a year of review and really making every effort to think it through. This process began in The Hague. It was followed by a high-level conference here at the UN in New York. We had an important area formula meeting of the Security Council that was organized by Japan and by Switzerland. We also organized a conference in Syracuse in Italy, where the president of the court was able to go. For some reason, my invitation got lost in the mail somewhere, but Sylvia was able to be there. Civil society and academia were there to reflecting together on how to ensure consistent, sustainable support for the court in the coming decade. And this meeting is yet another opportunity for states parties to reflect seriously, not only on what we have done, but what we have not been able to do and how we could, in fact, improve it. And I think the activities this year have really allowed us to reaffirm our commitment to the rule of law, to the principle of accountability in the present circumstances. When important values underlying the court are put into question and there is a risk of their being undermined by direct and indirect attacks against its court, its officials, and its staff, as well as others cooperating with it. And so I have another question for you. If the court was irrelevant, why would it be under such attack? And it's not a totally rhetorical question. The reality is the court is under attack, quite systematic attack on its ability to do its job. Attempts to create fear among prosecutors, fear among judges, attempts to destroy the IT infrastructure of the court. Why would that be happening? Because the court is doing its job. Because the court it's certainly relevant to those people who are being made uncomfortable. And so we need to understand its value as we address these challenges and stand together to deal with the problem. The first point I want to make in conclusion is the court can't work in isolation. It needs political support. It needs the support of states parties. It needs a steady commitment on the financial side. We also need to continue our efforts to promote the universality and the full implementation of the Rome Statute. And we have to ensure that states parties have the effective legislation that they need in order to be able to carry out and assist the court in all of its work. In other words, we need to strengthen the domestic role that states parties must play in order to give complementarity its full sway. So that, I think, is some of the reflections that we need to think about as we go forward. And I think it's important for us to recognize that from my perspective and from the perspective of the presidency, it is not a glass that is half empty, it is a glass that is half full. And we have to continue to reflect on how we can do a better job for victims, how we can do a better job for survivors, how we can do a better job to deal with this very difficult issue of impunity, and how we have to recognize that the court cannot be alone in doing this. It needs the work of states parties to make it the effective instrument that we believe it should be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, for that very valuable and useful presentation. And I would now like to give the floor to the President of the Court. Mr. Hoffmanski, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by thanking France and Senegal for the excellent work, co-facilitators on cooperation already for several years. This work is much appreciated by the court. Thank you. As you know, the cooperation is one of the most fundamental elements of the Rome Statute system. The drafters of the statutes created a judicial pillar consisting of the court and an enforcement pillar consisting of states. Cooperation of the latter with the former is critical for the system to function as intended. And as you all know, full cooperation with the court's investigation and prosecutions is a legal obligation of the state parties in accordance with Article 86 of the Rome Statute and other relevant provisions of the statute. And if we consider cooperation in a broader sense, it also includes the political and the diplomatic support for the court. That support is necessary, but to protect the court against attempts to undermine its work and to expand the community of states committed to the ICC's mandate. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as I understand as I underlined in my opening remarks on Monday, it is important that the support and cooperation of states is not made conditional upon the court acting in a specific way in the matters that fall under judicial prosecutorial independence. Indeed, support for the court should be support for the institution and all its activities as a whole. States should extend their full cooperation for the court's operation, even when these may not fully align with the state's national interests. This is really essential for strengthening the rule of law at the international level. For full cooperation to be possible, it is vital that the state parties domesticate the Rome Statute cooperation provisions, adopting national procedures for all forms of cooperation foreseen in the statute. I find it regrettable that almost half of the state parties have not yet done that or not done it fully. I am of course aware that the legislative agenda of many states is very busy with competing priorities, but I think on this as a long-term investment. The ICC is a permanent institution, and it is in our interests to put in place a solid legal framework to make sure you can comply swiftly and fully with your obligations toward the court whenever the issue may arise. I also call upon all states to ratify and implement of the agreement on the privileges and the immunities of the court. This is critical for the ability of the court personnel, including counsel, to conduct official missions in a safe manner and without fear of interference with their independent functions. The importance of all state parties joining this agreement is further underlined in light of the recent threats and attacks against the court. The security of court officials and staff must be taken seriously, and the APIC, which complements Article 48 of the Rome Statute, is a key tool in that respect. As such, I must express my concern about the fact that 45 state parties are yet to join APIC, and I urge them to do so without delay. Finally, I would like to appeal to all states parties to conclude cooperation agreements with the ICC on the relocation of witnesses, enforcement of sentences, the temporary release of persons, and the final release of persons. All these forms of cooperation are truly critical for the court's operations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by thanking all states and organizations that extend vitally important cooperation and assist the ICC. Many countries in particular have invested extensive efforts in enabling the court to conduct its operation on their territory years after year. This is very highly appreciated. And As I said earlier, justice is a team effort. Together, we can achieve our goals. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, distinguished President. I now give the floor to the Deputy Prosecutor, Mr. Mandya Yang. You have the floor. Thank you very much, President. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a real honor, and I'm humbled, in fact, to once again have the opportunity to join you here on this podium, as was the case last year, to represent the Office of the Prosecutor, especially to talk about this topic that is essential, which is cooperation. I'm absolutely in agreement with what Mr. Ray, the Vice President, said when he said that the court cannot work in an isolated fashion. I just finished a visit to Africa, a short one, where I recalled this because I saw, as was mentioned before, there was so much need for justice. That was the expectation in these countries where they have tried to look for solutions, and I've tried to say that in the very heart, they say in the heart of your statute, if we're incapable, you're there to help us. Well, we don't reject that call because what they say is true. I did not fail to recall them that what you see, what they're looking towards with so many expectations, it's a giant that unfortunately lacks membership. Those members are you. I promise, however, that we are going to see what we can do together as a court. But do not be surprised if we come back to request your cooperation, because we don't have a police force. We don't, what's often referred to as law enforcement, we don't have that. That is the arm of justice. We lack that, and therefore, in effect, states have to help us to be able to work in that sense. So I think that cooperation, I wouldn't even say that cooperation, it's not only essential, in fact, our justice depends on cooperation. Without cooperation, we cannot make progress. Now, as was indicated before, you certainly have heard, and President Ofmansky mentioned this, in the statute already, we have sufficient legal bases for that the member states and even beyond them can find a normal process in order to be able to cooperate. But since for some time now, we also are trying to consolidate that foundation by seeing in detail how can we work with states. That has been the policy of the prosecutor, Khan. If you look in Latin America, in Venezuela, in Colombia, whenever there's a mechanism in force, we try through a memorandum of understanding to provide a legal framework that goes into detail. And what's more interesting for us as well in this process is especially that we want this to be a two-way street. On the one hand, we need the support of the state to do all of our investigations, but at the same time, what these states cannot do, but what they try to do with a view towards complementarity, our new process allows us to no longer see this alternative as just a mechanic issue these states are incapable of doing, and therefore we will do it. No. Therefore, the cooperation and complementarity these go hand in hand in our vision in our office. Despite the challenges, we will try to see precisely through cooperation how we can, with technical assistance, with capacity building, how we can strengthen the domestic means so that this justice, which is an element of sovereignty, can continue functioning through these memorandums of understanding that we signed recently with the Democratic Republic of the Congo and also in the Central African Republic, when the prosecutor said that he was not going to open new cases, and through the cases that remain, we will continue to work with states, counting on them, but for the rest, we will allow states to move forward, but we will provide to them our technical means to provide support. And we've also signed a memorandum of understanding with the Special Criminal Court, which includes a series of elements regarding, for example, identification of evidence, and also with a view towards complementarity. We're working with other states, such as Nigeria, in order to have a similar process that will allow us to have more spaces to work together within the framework of this well-focused cooperation. And this allows us now to have a stronger connection with civil society as well, which doesn't have sovereignty, but everybody knows that they play an essential role in the workings of the court. So there's a series of issues that we try to deal with through this memorandum of understanding that we sign with all of these states. And this allows us truly to strengthen the ties that we have between the prosecutor's office, and I would even say the court, and the member states within the framework of these cooperation efforts. So this is just in a few words what I wanted to say. And regarding the mandates, perhaps later on I will have an opportunity to make more comments. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur le...
It's me who is thanking you, sir. I now give the floor to the Registrar of the Court, Mr. Osvaldo Gilet. You have the floor for 5 minutes, sir.
Merci.
Thank you, Ambassador. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to address you today as a part of this plenary session. Cooperation has traditionally been one of the two primary pillars of the court's work. It is also a major part of what the registry does. By way of example, between September 2022 and September 2023, 300 requests for assistance were sent by the registry. What emerges clearly through those figures is that each of these requests is but the beginning of a dialogue with states. The complete implementation and answering of these requests demands expertise, resources, and sustained commitment and engagement on the part of the court. Moreover, we also have taken into account the new parameters within which the court is working, which have an impact on cooperation. Here I'm talking about the expansion of the geographical area in which we operate. That's obliged us to adapt to very different legal regimes. We can also point to the new threats that the court is creating, and our activities are having to be undertaken in zones of conflict. The court has requested new forms of cooperation linked to security demands. For example, France is providing assistance to us by providing us with medical training for our staff, and other countries have helped us with the storage of certain weapons on their territory. I'm also cognizant of crucial changes that are occurring within international relations. It's vital for the court to be better equipped to understand the context in which we are requesting states' assistance. Another aspect that needs to be taken into account is that supporting the judicial cooperation of the registry bolsters judicial cooperation with and throughout the court as a whole. Indeed, the registry puts its judicial cooperation resources and expertise within the reach of all member states and within the hands of the presidencies. So that helps it work on asset freezing, for example. We also work with the Office of the Prosecutor on common projects which require the support of states. And we harness advice and we submit requests to help them as they conduct investigations.
The responsibilities in terms of cooperation are therefore important, diverse, and increasingly complex. Having this in mind, I am creating within the registry a new section, the Judicial Cooperation Support Section, or the JCSS, with the responsibility of centralizing all the aforementioned functions and giving our cooperation experts the best possible platform to deliver results. The establishment of the section will empower and enable the registry to deliver on its mandate more effectively at the strategic and operational levels. The JCSS will be constituted as of next year with the aim of fully operationalizing through key recruitments by the middle of the year. Now, one of the 2 units in these sections will be devoted to the arrest and surrender of suspects at large. The experience of 17 arrest operations has taught us that implementation of requests for arrest and surrender need close follow-up by the court. Partnerships must be created with the national authorities in charge in order not only to take advantage of all opportunities that present themselves to arrest fugitives, but also to proactively create those opportunities. I will summarize a few of the lessons we have learned over the years and which will inform the cooperation strategies that the registry will pursue under my leadership. We have invested time and resources to developing close relationships with national focal points within the central administrations of key cooperation partners. These relationships have allowed us to develop mutually better understanding of the challenges that both the court and the states face in implementing requests for cooperations and have paid dividends in us finding practical solutions to overcome various problems. I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to our focal points for their assistance, for their constructive engagement and commitment for our common cause. While practical solutions and good communication are essential ingredients for effective cooperation, much will always depend on having the appropriate legal framework in place to allow national authorities to execute the court's cooperation requests. As such, I wish to stress again today the importance of robust implementing legislation that facilitates cooperation with the court. We will continue to liaise closely with states to understand national requirements so that our requests can be adapted accordingly and the processes be made efficient as possible. We must also pay due regard to what is often termed voluntary cooperation. That is, forms of cooperation that fall outside of Part 9 of the Rome Statute, but which are essential for the effective functioning of the court. Experience has shown that the relocation of witnesses and the implementation of interim release and release for defendants has proven to be a challenge. Finding workable solutions requires solid partnerships, as well as sustained multilateral attention from all parties involved. The registry will continue to engage with states to develop options on filling these systemic gaps in a structured manner. The court must continue to strengthen our cooperation with international and regional organizations. I would like to thank the United Nations for its constant support to the court. I also value our constructive interactions with the European Union and the African Union, and I am looking forward to engaging with new partners and developing more specialized relationships in Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. The occasion of the 25th anniversary of the Rome Statute is a natural time for reflection, and one of the main takeaways for me is the continuing need for audacity and resilience. We need to be audacious in order to innovate and rethink cooperation so that it is fit to face the challenges that the new global realities throw our way. But we need to also be resilient in order to survive attacks and not allow anything to distract our focus from serving the cause of justice. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much indeed, Registrar Sir. The importance of cooperation has been clearly illustrated by the various statements we've had, and I once again thank the briefers that we've just heard. Among the instruments, the important instruments for cooperation, there are the cooperation agreements, the voluntary cooperation agreements, that is. Of course, we encourage state parties to sign those. And today, we have the opportunity to hear our Belgian colleagues speak on this matter. Our Belgian colleague will discuss this matter based on their own experience. So with that, I wish to give the floor to the Belgian delegation. Ambassador, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you, co-facilitators, for convening this meeting. Thank you for giving us the floor. First and foremost, I wish to thank the President of the Assembly and the senior representatives of the court that we've just heard. I thank them for their very enlightening introductory remarks. As has been underscored, cooperation is a shared responsibility of states parties and is vital to allow the court to meet the goals assigned to it. In a certain number of cases, cooperation of the states party is made obligatory by the Rome Statute system, but other forms of cooperation that we could term voluntary cooperation are not formally imposed upon states by the Rome Statute, but are nevertheless essential if the court is to discharge its mandate. It is for this reason, and it is in that frame of mind, that Belgium has entered into several cooperation agreements in these fields. The following fields, I'll give you a few examples. We have an agreement on the relocation of protected witnesses or victims. We have an agreement on the enforcement of sentences, an agreement on interim release, and a new framework agreement that we've signed on the release of persons, which Belgium and the registry signed on the 7th of July last during the ceremony to mark the 25th anniversary of the Rome Statute. I just want to touch on that last agreement. We are all well aware that the court has no territory onto which suspects or detained persons could be released when the court has ordered their interim release, or when they've definitively been acquitted, or after having served their sentence. However, without corporations of states, these people will have to remain in the court's custody unduly. States parties must therefore agree to equitably shoulder their responsibilities here. We should underscore that the agreement between Belgium and the court regarding the release of persons does not impose upon states new demands for cooperation. Demands for cooperation are reviewed by the court on a case-by-case basis, but such cooperation is vital because it allows the court to identify a state that is available for this aspect of procedure, and it allows the state to provide assistance by resolving legal and practical matters in advance of the request being fulfilled, and that's been underlined. Based on our experience, we wish to once again encourage state parties to do everything they can to cooperate as broadly as possible with the court, namely by entering into and signing cooperation agreements. To conclude, I just want to take this opportunity as I address you to confirm to you, and this was underscored by the registrar himself, that Belgium is deeply honoured to have signed on Thursday, the 7th of December 2023, a 10th enhanced cooperation agreement with the court that concerns the storage of weapons and the use of training infrastructure for security, the court's security personnel in high-risk environments. I thank you for your attention.
Merci.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that statement. It clearly illustrates the importance of signing such agreements. I would add that the agreement between France and the ICC on the enforcement of services signed in 2021 entered into force on the 17th of July 2023. I'm now going to open the floor to member states and other participants, states parties that are on the speakers list. I would emphasize that it is important to not exceed your allotted speaking time so that we can hold our meeting within the time allotted to us. First of all, I give the floor to the delegation of Costa Rica, speaking on behalf of a group of states parties.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon to you all.
Of the court, Mr. Deputy Prosecutor, Mr. Registrar, Excellency, Mr. Vice President of the Bureau, co-facilitators, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the following 47 state parties: Afghanistan, Argentina, Bangladesh, Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Chile, Cyprus, Denmark, Dominican Republic, Estonia, Finland, Germany, Guatemala, Greece, Honduras, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Jordan, Latvia, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Madagascar, Moldova, the Netherlands, North Macedonia, Norway, Portugal, Poland, Romania, Sierra Leone, Samoa, South Africa, Slovakia, Slovenia, Sweden, Switzerland, Tunisia, Uganda, Vanuatu, Zambia, and my own country, Costa Rica. Ongoing conflicts and crises around the globe where serious international crimes might have been committed highlight the critical role of the ICC. Regrettably, the court is needed more than we could have imagined 25 years ago. Last year, the Assembly, and I quote, reaffirmed its support for the consistent implementation of the court's mandate across the situations and cases under its jurisdiction in the interest of justice and the victims' rights of access to justice, and stressed the need for sustainable resources for all situations and cases, as well as cooperation with the court to that end. End of quote. To ensure that we live up to the challenges of today and the legitimate expectation of victims and affected communities, we must put those words into practice by providing the court the political, operational, and financial support it needs. As Assembly, we must support the work of the court across each and all situations before it. All victims deserve equal access to justice. We must work together to protect the court's judicial and prosecutorial independence. And we should together decisively reject threats aimed at the court and those cooperating with it, including civil society. While ensuring the court must exercise a sound management of its resources, the ICC must be provided with the required financial capacity to fulfill its mandate. We must be ready to invest in justice. Cooperation with the court makes justice possible. We celebrate the first case completed in full which was made possible by cooperation. Our governments recall that this court was created for present and future generations. Let's continue working together to ensure accountability for the most serious crimes of international concern and provide justice to its victims today and in the future. I thank you.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Ambassador. I now give the floor to the delegation of Argentina. I ask the speaker to not exceed 2 minutes.
Buenos días.
A good morning to you all. President of the Court, Deputy Prosecutor, Registrar, Co-Facilitator, Co-President, esteemed colleagues. First and foremost, let me make it clear that Argentina always speaks in Spanish in this plenary because we are staunch defenders of multilingualism in the court as a demonstration of inclusivity. But at the same time, here I'm speaking on behalf of a group of countries, so I do apologize for that fact, or the fact rather that I will now speak in English.
It is my privilege to stand here today on behalf of the core group of the MLA initiative, consisting of Argentina, Belgium, Mongolia, the Netherlands, Senegal, and Slovenia. As some of you might know, last May, the Ljubljana, the Hague Convention on the Investigation and Prosecution of the Crime of Genocide, Crimes Against Humanity, War Crimes, and other international crimes was adopted by consensus. The negotiations took place in Ljubljana, and 68 states, as well as 7 international organizations and 11 civil society organizations participated therein. The Ljubljana, the Hague Convention, aims to provide national authorities with a modern legal framework to cooperate with one another in the investigation and prosecution of core international crimes. As such, it touches upon many of the issues that are also dealt with in the Hague Working Group on Cooperation, but on the horizontal rather than the vertical level. Although the convention was adopted outside the ICC framework, the commonalities are numerous. By enhancing domestic adjudication, it makes the principle of complementarity more effective. The Convention uses the Rome Statute definitions of crimes, and both the Rome Statute and the Convention aim to end impunity for the most serious international crimes. On the 14th and 15th of February 2024, the signing conference for the Convention will take place in The Hague. It goes without saying that we hope to welcome many of you there and call upon all states to consider becoming a party to this important convention. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very much indeed to you, Madame Luxero. I'd like to now give the floor to the delegation of the United Kingdom. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ambassador, for giving me the floor. On behalf of the United Kingdom, I would like to thank the co-facilitators for cooperation, Ambassador François Alabrun of France and Ambassador Momar Gueye of Senegal, for their excellent work on this important topic this year. International cooperation is absolutely essential to ensure that the ICC can carry out its mandate in full. When the Rome Statute was adopted 25 years ago, it was well understood that its ability to operate would be dependent on cooperation from states parties. With no police force of its own and no prison, the court relies on the national law enforcement authorities of states parties to arrest individuals, provide protection to witnesses, and enforce sentences. These are fundamental functions which allow the court to conduct its proceedings effectively. Without this cooperation, there will be no trials and no effective sentences. The duty falls on all states parties, but unfortunately, the burden is falling on too few states. There are 124 states parties, but this number has not been mirrored in the ratification of agreements on cooperation. The calls of states parties on the court to do more and to do it faster are not mirrored by efforts to take the practical steps needed to help the court. The reality is that too few states parties have agreements to provide the cooperation the court needs. The court is currently dealing with a high number of situations, vulnerable witnesses and arrest warrants, and the need for greater cooperation is becoming urgent. There will be further need for states to help with sentence enforcement if, as we hope, the court is successful in securing more convictions. The United Kingdom is party to all of the main cooperation agreements and has established procedures to respond to requests for assistance, closely working with the cooperation staff at the court. We are happy to share our experience of doing so. Today, the court operates in an increasingly hostile environment, as evidenced by the recent cyber attack and Russian coercive measures against the court officials. Now more than ever, in the face of these attacks, strong political and diplomatic support for the court by states parties is a crucial form of cooperation. But while words of support are important, practical measures to back up these statements are needed even more. The United Kingdom stands ready, as it always has, to share that responsibility. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam. I now give the floor to the delegation of the Netherlands. 2 minutes.
Merci pour la parole.
Thank you for giving me the floor.
The co-facilitators for their continued efforts on this important issue. Cooperation is a fundamental aspect of our day-to-day work as the host state of the court. This cooperation ranges from security and the protection of the court's premises, officials and witnesses, to facilitating the entry of all those who need to be present at the court and the transportation of suspects. We take pride in this work as it allows the court to fulfill its important mandate. The need for cooperation with the court has perhaps never been so crucial as it is today. We have all witnessed that the court and its staff have become objects of external attacks which try to threaten the work of the court. Cooperation is a cornerstone for the proper functioning of the court. It is our common responsibility, in light of these threats, to reiterate our full commitment to ensure the court can effectively and efficiently fulfill its mandate. For the relocation of witnesses, the enforcement of sentences, and the release of persons either on an interim or permanent basis, the court depends on voluntary cooperation of all state parties. Unfortunately, we have witnessed that voluntary cooperation is extremely difficult to secure for the court, making that suboptimal and temporary solutions have to be found that are often also quite costly. In order for the court to function optimally, state parties should be vigilant that the burden of cooperation is shared by all state parties and not just a handful. It should therefore be stressed that voluntary cooperation agreements provide a general framework that allow the states considerable flexibility to grant or refuse cooperation in a specific case. The Netherlands feels compelled to advocate that all state parties strongly consider concluding such agreements. If more states do so, the court will not have to overask those states that have concluded these agreements and is provided with the tools to efficiently and effectively fulfill its mandate. The Netherlands hopes that the cooperation with the court will continue to strengthen. The Netherlands also wishes to commend those states that have entered into new agreements over the past year. In conclusion, we wish to stress the importance of cooperation in the battle against all international crimes. And in this regard, we hope to see you at the side event on the new Ljubljana, The Hague Convention on Interstate Cooperation for the National Adjudication on Core Crimes on Monday. Thank you.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam. I now give the floor to the delegation of Japan. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ambassador Bloom, for steering discussion on cooperation. Given the increasing number of situations and cases handled by the ICC, cooperation has been more critical than ever for sustainable operation of the court. Against this background, while promotion of voluntary cooperation agreement is essential components of cooperation, we believe that enhancing the capacity of states, in particular capacity of developing states in the field of criminal justice, is also a crucial element of cooperation. During President Hochmansky's visit to Japan in October last year, the ICC signed a cooperation agreement with UNAFE, the United Nations Asia and Far East Institute for the Prevention of Crime and the Treatment of Offenders, whose costs and personnel are fully covered by the government of Japan. And based on this agreement, UNAFE organizes, conducts capacity building activities for the criminal justice personnel from developing countries all over the world with participation of ICC officials. This year, UNAFE invited Vice President Judge Min Dua to give a lecture on the role of the ICC and crimes against children in January. Judge Aitara also delivered a lecture online on the transnational organized crimes and the role of the ICC in a UNAFE training course in May. UNAFE will continue to organize these activities in 2024 and beyond. The government of Japan encourages developing partners to make the best use of UNAFE's programs. Japan will continue to strive to enhance cooperation provided for in the Roma Statute. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, sir. I now give the floor to the representative of the Coalition for the International Criminal Court. You have the floor for 2 minutes.
Excellencies, over the past 25 years, civil society organizations and human rights defenders have been on the front lines of the efforts to ensure justice for victims and serious international crimes. They do so at great risk. Many human rights defenders and their families in the ICC country situation face harassment, pressure, intimidation, and even criminalization in efforts to silence them and stop their work on behalf of victims, and in turn undermine the ICC implementation of its mandate. The Assembly Presidency has been vocal in condemning attacks on the court and its official aim at undermining the ICC mandate, making use of the Assembly strategy adopted last year to respond to threats and attacks against the court, its officials, and those cooperating with it. This strong show of support for the court from its state parties is crucial. This vocal support should also be extended to those civil society cooperating with the court. We urge state parties make full use of the Assembly strategy to defend and condemn threats and attacks against civil society organizations and human rights defenders who are targeted for their work to advance justice in the Rome Statute system and take a step to strengthen national framework for the protection of human rights defenders. This year, the Assembly Presidency took another step forward by producing a set of guidelines which has been adopted by the Bureau to ensure that human rights defenders can engage with the Assembly safely. We thank President Fernández de Gurmendi for her leadership on this important issue, and we look forward to working with the incoming Assembly Presidency and Bureau to continue this essential discussion, including on implementation of the guidelines with genuine and accessible consultation with those most concerned. The coalition stand ready to engage. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much. And I will give the floor now to the Ambassador of Senegal, who will continue leading our discussion. Thank you very much. Co-facilitators, Mr. Vice President of the Assembly of States Party, the President of the International Criminal Court, the Deputy Prosecutor, Registrar, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of this first segment, I would like to commend and express thanks to the heads of the bodies of the court who have participated in this high-level segment by sharing with us eloquently and generously their reflections and their analysis of the first item on our agenda on the 25 years of the Rome Statute, achievements and perspectives. These observations are particularly relevant and useful. They're the result of the ample experience of the Court, its evolution, its achievements, but it also expresses the awareness of the numerous challenges that we're going to have to overcome together. I would also like to thank all of the governmental delegations and civil society delegations who have shown interest in all of the issues related to cooperation and reflection on the areas that must be improved and that must be implemented in this area. The issue of cooperation as an essential element, one of the most important pillars of the Rome Statute. This was highlighted during the discussions. In other words, the effectiveness of this institution that we have established, and in large part depends on the effectiveness of cooperation from member states, and even from those who are not members, and also from international, regional, and sub-regional organizations. In any case, the efforts that have been achieved by the allies of the Court, particularly when it comes to financial investigations, the location and freezing of assets, identification of evidence, testimony, and the voluntary cooperation agreements, the ambition of ensuring that the Court is in conditions to be successful leads us to adopt the necessary measures in order to broaden and strengthen this commitment. This will allow us, at the end of the day, to sustainably achieve the goals of the Rome Statute when it comes to the fight against the impunity in the cases of those perpetrators of international crimes. Thus, these observations bring us to the end of this first plenary. This first segment of our plenary. The second will be, as was mentioned by the co-facilitator, is more technical in nature. It will focus on the Court's priorities, particularly the issue of arrests. I thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. So we have reached the end of this first segment. I would like to thank the panelists who have joined us. It's been an honor, and I would like to now move on to the second segment. We have, regarding arrests, which is an essential matter in the criminal procedure. We will listen to the Minister of State in charge of Justice of the Central African Republic, Mr. Arnaud Jubai Abazan, and I would like to thank him very much for being here with us. And we also have Mr. Racine Lee, the Special Advisor to the Prosecutor, Mr. Tuama Salminen, the External Affairs Coordinator of the Registry, Ms. Kate Orlovsky, Director of the IBA, ICC, and ICL program. So without further delay, I would like to give the floor to the distinguished minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Facilitateur.
Thank you, Mr. Facilitator, co-facilitator. I have the honor once again of taking the floor during this second segment of the work of our session as the ASP. I'm going to be discussing the experience of the CAR in terms of arrests and the execution of arrest warrants that have been issued by the ICC. I wish to reiterate that international criminal justice within the ICC is based on cooperation of states. For the ICC, cooperation needs to take place between the states parties and the court. That's vital for the ICC to be able to discharge its mandate. As regards my country, the CAR, in 2010, our government enshrined in its national legislation international crimes and procedures for cooperation within the ICC. That's now in our domestic legal arsenal, namely the Criminal Code and the Criminal Procedure Code. The CAR has seized the ICC of several cases as part of executing arrest warrants issued by the ICC. We have cooperated closely with the ICC and also with the following states that themselves have had to execute arrest warrants. The Kingdom of Belgium, they had to execute an arrest warrant issued by the ICC as part of the case submitted by the CAR. There's the Republic of Chad. They executed an arrest warrant. The French Republic and the Republic of Uganda. And my country, the CAR itself, had to execute a warrant issued by the ICC. The execution of these arrest warrants is an expression of the genuine political will on the part of the government to uphold its commitments in terms of fighting against grave violations of human rights and international humanitarian law. It should be made clear that the execution of arrest warrants issued by the ICC takes account of evidence and legal procedures dealing with suspects and adheres to the highest standards of confidentiality. The professionalism of actors, logistics, and equipment and material and resources are crucial components of the execution of ICC arrest warrants. However, unfortunately, challenges are always present. Among these, we can point to the reluctance of certain states. They show a lack of political will. There are limited means. There are security issues. The fact that borders are porous. There's the issue, problems with locating and identifying suspects. All of these are difficulties, if not challenges, impeding the execution of ICC arrest warrants. In terms of fluidity and how easy cooperation with the ICC is, the CAR has worked with the court. In so doing, and to cooperate with the court, we established focal points whose responsibility was to facilitate cooperation with the ICC. Cooperation involves the execution of arrest warrants and the exchange of information as part of the implementation of the principle of cooperation and the principle of complementarity, the ultimate goal being to distribute competencies, authorities between the ITC, the Special Court, and the competent national criminal courts, so that light can be shed on these crimes. We're looking to enhance cooperation, and as such, the government of the CAR and the ICC signed memoranda of understanding with the Office of the Prosecutor as part of cooperation between the ICC and the government. And we have another memorandum of understanding with the Special Court to fight against impunity when it comes to serious crimes as enshrined in the Rome Statute. On the basis of this CAR experience, I would urgently call upon all states parties to the Rome Statute to make cooperation the very linchpin of our success when it comes to ensuring international cooperation, criminal justice, because the effectiveness and the success of the court depends on you in guaranteeing that cooperation. Thank you for your cooperation and for the opportunity to share our experience in terms of executing arrest warrants from the ICC. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you very much, distinguished Minister. We are very pleased that you've been able to share your experience on this essential issue, and I would now like to give the floor to the Special Advisory to the Prosecutor of the Court, Mr. Racine Lee.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, distinguished ambassador, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor, a real pleasure to participate in this technical panel. As the name indicates, we are here to provide some practical examples on what's going on. In the concept note, you ask us to present an overview of arrests and to identify a perspective. I will try to work based on what's been done in terms of arrests and thus provide a perspective that would be more specific from the Office of the Prosecutor. My colleague, Thomas, will also have the perspective of the registry. Now, in terms of an overview, first we must recognize that the issue of the arrests of suspects at large remains complex, and it depends on two joint elements. These main elements are the resources of the jurisdiction or the court, and also political support that the court enjoys from states. And this stems from the report on the strategies for arrest of 2014, and also from the report on the review of the court, which is the IA report. And through these two elements, we have been able to carry out several arrests that I will actually categorize in three different groups. First, we have the transfer to the court of suspects who were detained by competent national authorities. In this first category, just as an example, we have the cases of Thomas Lobanga and also Germain Katanga. We also have Mokom, Laurent Gbagbo, among others. It's a long list. We have a second group. These are the voluntary surrenders. These are the people who voluntarily turn themselves into the court. In these cases, we have Jean Bosco Katanga, we have Ongwen. Recently, we also have the case of Abdallah Rahman, who turned themselves in to the authorities, and this facilitated their transfer to the court. Even though for Ongwen and for Al-Rahman, this was also the result of efforts that have been made in order to locate them, trace them, establish contacts, mobilize our partners and networks. And in the case of Nataganda, this is also part of these efforts, but the decision was he personally decided to turn himself into the court without prior contact. The third group are the arrests that follow a strategy of the court, and in fact we have two cases, the case of Bemba, but we also have the case of Ngasona. Bemba, as you'll recall, he was arrested, thanks to information that allowed us to trace his movements, and we were able to arrest him in Europe. This was in Belgium. And we also have the case of Ngasona. He was arrested through thanks to flight records. We were able to carry that out. This arrest shows to a certain extent that cooperation with the authorities of the points of entry, these are customs and immigration, airlines, and other national authorities that are responsible for law enforcement. This was essential in order to trace and arrest. So these are the various components that we can identify. Now, what arises from this? First, we realize that the first component, which is the transfer from the national authorities, this is the key issue, and this is followed by what we refer to the people who turn themselves in. Now, the strategy that is implemented by the court in order to arrest this involves two cases, and what is the perspective that we have? This simply means that the analysis first. We need to justify the reason why. The main reason is that up until now, there is no specific team in the prosecutor's office that is responsible for establishing a clear strategy. We have SALT. This is the office that is responsible for tracking suspects at large, but it does not have a dedicated team. It does not have those resources. That's why, understanding that in its current form, it is not suited to this goal, and it is not able to provide the results that are expected by the office. And since its creation, SALT has not benefited from sufficient resources in order to fully carry out all of these activities. And also, this is a risk for the office. This was from the strategy 2023-2025 that, and of course, this situation could undermine trust and impact the work of the office. Thus, the office decided to provide a mechanism, an effective mechanism for tracking that has all of the abilities and capabilities to carry out an effective arrest strategy. This new office, which we are aiming to establish, will be focused on a series of areas. The first will be the definition of the roles and the responsibilities with the registry in order to see how we are going to implement this strategy. The other issue that does not exist and that we will have to establish is the process, the protocols, and direct guidelines for arrest. This is very important. This team, once it's established, will have to carry out those tasks. The other issue is the establishment of partners. You talked about cooperations. We need a network of partners and also cooperators who will be able to help us identify, locate, and carry out arrest strategies. And also we have the issues of staffing. And then there are other elements that will be dealt with, but this is what I wanted to focus on, what we can do on the one hand, and what are the perspectives as the prosecutor's office. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank you, Mr. Lee, for your presentation, and I will now give the floor to the External Affairs Coordinator in the registry, Mr. Salmim Nim. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Ambassador, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. The court is at a critical juncture in its history. 16 arrest warrants are currently still to be implemented, and that number is only the public arrest warrants. Without any arrest being made, we risk having a sort of vacuum. That would be an affront to the victims demanding justice, and that would also jeopardize the legitimacy of what the court has accomplished as we mark our 25th anniversary, the 25th anniversary of the Rome Statute. In an ideal world, following the issuance of an arrest warrant by the Chamber, the Register would submit a request for the arrest and the transferal of the suspect to a number of clearly defined states. The person would be arrested as soon as possible, and the procedure enshrined in Article 59 of the Rome Statute would already be incorporated into national criminal procedures. The submission of the suspect to the court would be organized from the very end of the national procedure, and the suspect's transfer to The Hague would take place in a plane made available by a state party.
The reality today is unfortunately quite different. It will take states parties, together with the court, both the Office of the Prosecutor and the Registry within our respective mandates, to work together to devise political, operational, and financial strategies geared towards the arrest of these fugitives. As the Registrar already mentioned, the creation of a specific unit for suspects at large within the Registry will allow experts to allocate time to develop networks and partnerships and propose creative solutions together with states who bear the ultimate responsibility for arresting the persons against whom an ICC arrest warrant has been issued. Such examples include the use of artificial intelligence, finding legal solutions, and offering rewards or financial incentives to support the arrest of fugitives. One of the ideas on the table is to encourage further cooperation among states in specific regions so that like-minded states can pool their resources to achieve the desired results. We've learned a great deal after 17 arrest operations. One of the lessons learned has been the importance for states to have strong implementing legislation, enabling the judiciary at the national level to be in charge of the execution of the arrest warrant, thus removing any potential political dimension in the arrest process. Another is that the involvement of the court in tracking fugitives needs to be continuous, and only through this involvement can we increase the chances that our requests are prioritized and answered. Through such partnerships with national authorities, we can help states to receive the up-to-date information that is so crucial to securing arrests. Now, Mr. Ambassador, I know we are pressed for time, so I will conclude my remarks, but before doing so, please allow me to thank the 9 states parties who have executed arrest operations pursuant to ICC's requests, namely the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Central African Republic, Chad, Mali, Côte d'Ivoire, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Niger. And please allow me also to thank Ambassadors of France and Senegal as the co-facilitators for cooperation, for your steadfast support on this important issue. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour cette
Thank you very much for that very valuable statement, and I will now give the floor to our last panelist, Ms. Orlovsky, the director of the IBA, the ICC and ICL program of the International Bar Association.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I am grateful for this opportunity to address you today on behalf of the International Bar Association, International Criminal Court, and International Criminal Law Program on this important topic. The arrest and surrender of suspects to the ICC represents a key moment in the justice process. Because the court does not have the ability to arrest and surrender suspects, the court's ability to advance from investigation to trial is fully dependent on the cooperation of states parties. The court itself has identified the lack of implementation of arrest warrants as a major strategic risk for the effective execution of the ICC's mandate. The execution of arrest warrants is likewise the first priority affirmed by the yearly ASP resolution on cooperation, which expresses concern over the fact that warrants of arrest remain outstanding over 16 individuals, while still others may be outstanding that have been issued under seal. Yet, the Rome Statute does not set out a detailed procedure that states parties must follow in the execution of these requests, leaving a degree of procedural flexibility for states parties to meet their obligations. Without specific procedural guidance in the Rome Statute, it becomes of the utmost importance for states parties to establish national frameworks, focused in particular on political and operational support to ensure prompt response to the requests for arrest and surrender of persons to the ICC, as also recommended in the IER report. In addition, other forms of cooperation established by Article 93 of the statute contribute significantly to the court's effort to trace suspects, including the identification of whereabouts of persons and the location of items. These obligations should also be considered and implemented in the development of national frameworks for cooperation. For its part, the Assembly, in line with the mandate established by the Resolution on Cooperation, should increase its efforts to facilitate a comprehensive and systematic consideration of measures to increase the prospects of arrest, taking into account the experience of national, international, and hybrid tribunals. Consideration should be given to the development of conditionality policies creating positive or negative incentives for the cooperation of states parties in the arrest and surrender of suspects, as well as positive and negative incentives for the accused to voluntarily surrender. These policies should be enacted in close coordination with national authorities and/or international and regional organizations. As states parties develop procedures to cooperate with the court in the arrest and surrender of suspects, it is important to bear in mind the essential obligation to protect fair trial rights. Ensuring that arrest and surrender respects the rights of suspects safeguards the legal process before the court and may prevent delays and additional litigation in the pretrial phase. The rights of the arrested person are well established by the Rome Statute and relevant international human rights instruments. Article 59.2 of the statute establishes that an arrested suspect should be brought without delay before the competent judicial authority in the custodial state to determine, inter alia, if the person's rights have been respected. National procedures should reaffirm the rights of the arrested person and determine which remedies could be applied in the case of their violation in close consultation with the ICC pretrial chamber that has jurisdiction over the case. States parties should give effective implementation to the Rome Statute provisions, giving the arrested person the right to bring a challenge on the basis of the principle of ne bis in idem and to seek interim release pending surrender. National procedures should also clearly specify the documentation that national authorities require the court to submit, as such documentation may vary from state to state. Finally, it is important to recall that the obligations for states parties to cooperate in the arrest and surrender of suspects represent only a facet of the more general duty of states parties to cooperate with the court. In addition to creating national frameworks for the effective implementation of cooperation obligations, states parties should increase their efforts towards ratifying and implementing the Agreement on Privileges and Immunities of the ICC, concluding voluntary agreements with the court, and ensuring adequate funding for the Trust Fund for Family Visits. Arrest and surrender is the first step from which other cooperation obligations follow, including the ability to implement judicial orders for provisional and final release, and ensuring the right to family life can be respected while in ICC detention. While cooperation is essential to achieve arrest and surrender, it is equally important for the court to have the necessary cooperation for the stages that follow. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank all of the panelists who have made extremely valuable presentations about their experiences and expectations when it comes to arrests. I would now like to provide delegates with an opportunity to speak. And I would like to thank the interpreters who accepted to provide us some additional time beyond 1 p.m., which is normally the end of our meetings here. So I would like to therefore ask speakers to be very disciplined with the use of time. I would first like to give the floor to the delegation of Mexico. You have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Facilitators, distinguished delegates, judges, staff at the ICC, civil society representatives. For the International Criminal Court to be in a position to fully discharge the mandate established in the Rome Statute, it is vital that there be cooperation from states parties, other states and international bodies such as the United Nations and its agencies. It is of the utmost importance to put an end to the perpetrators of the most serious crimes committed against humanity enjoying impunity. Consequently, we call upon states party to step up their cooperation with the court, including in the execution of the 17 arrest warrants issued for suspects which are still open. Requests relating to financial investigations, the freezing and confiscation of assets must always also be met by states parties. Moreover, Mexico invites states that have not yet done so to ratify or accede to the Rome Statute to achieve the system's universalization. Moreover, we reiterate the importance of enacting or amending national legislations such as to make it possible for us to cooperate with and fulfill the requests made by the ICC. All of these are crucial components to achieve the goal of investigating and prosecuting crimes under the statute wherever these may occur. Before concluding, the delegation of Mexico wishes to reaffirm its support for and commitment to the International Criminal Court in terms of cooperation. More specifically, we welcome the new policy on cooperation and complementarity put in place by Prosecutor Karim Khan, and we are grateful for proposals to improve and develop various modalities for cooperation, proposals made by Registrar Osvaldo Zavala. Please remain assured that you can find an ally in Mexico. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now give the floor to the delegation of Romania. 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. First, I want to thank the four speakers for their intervention, as well as the cooperation facilitation for the opportunity to intervene on behalf of the focal points on non-cooperation: Argentina, Ireland, Sierra Leone, Vanuatu, and Romania, to shed light on an important instrument that states parties have at their disposal in preventing cases of non-cooperation, namely the Toolkit on Non-Cooperation. This document is useful in the scenario when the court has not referred a matter of non-cooperation to the Assembly yet, but there are reasons to believe that a serious incident of non-cooperation, including a request for arrest and surrender of a person, is about to occur or is ongoing, and urgent action by the Assembly may bring about cooperation. In this case, what is needed is an urgent but informal response at the diplomatic level. And of course, the ASP president has a vital role in leading the response, and the focal points have to assist the president, but states parties can also play an important role, and the toolkit can guide their action. By way of example, the toolkit encourages monitoring through diplomatic network and obtaining early information about the future travel plans of persons subject to an arrest warrant. It also encourages the exchange of information with the court and the focal points by states, international and regional organizations, and civil society if they become aware of such travel plans. In terms of preventing instruments, the toolkit contains templates to draw on in encouraging states to meet their cooperation obligations in relation to the arrest and surrender of persons subject to a warrant, such as draft statements, draft note verbals, talking points, draft media releases, and draft tweets. So it really allows for a case-by-case and tailored approach that state parties can draw on. As focal points, we intend to continue raising awareness about this useful instrument, and we encourage delegations to consult the toolkit, which is available on the ASP website, and use it as needed. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much indeed, Madame. I now give the floor to the French delegation. I beseech you to not exceed 2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Co-Facilitator. We reiterate our full support for the International Criminal Court. That support must absolutely involve fully fledged cooperation in terms of arrests. The execution of arrest warrants is vital for the court to be able to discharge its mandate. As in other fields where cooperation is relevant, with arrests, the court also depends on states. States can put in place practical measures to improve their cooperation with the court, particularly cooperation with the Office of the Prosecutor and the registry that specified their needs today. The spontaneous sharing of information when the state is in possession of information regarding individuals at large is one way cooperation can be approved. Also, there is raising awareness of national police services and national investigation authorities regarding the court's mandates. There's the organization of regular meetings with competent national authorities, either before a request for assistance is issued or in response to one. The identification of national contact points who can expeditiously respond to urgent requests from the court, particularly those pertaining to the confirmation of information regarding the location of an individual. The making available of air transport for the transfer of an individual following his or her arrest. Every state has different means in terms of resources and due to its national context, but we have a common goal, and that is to support the court and deliver justice for the victims. France encourages all states party and non-party to identify good practices in terms of cooperation, to share them and to implement those that they are able to implement. I thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much indeed. I now give the floor to the delegation of the United States. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for inviting us again to participate in this plenary on cooperation. With many more fugitives at large than in courtrooms in The Hague, the slow pace of arrests represents a major impediment to justice in a number of ICC situation countries. It's clear that we all have much more to do at both practical political support and practical assistance in order to ensure the court can carry out its mandate. The United States remains committed to supporting the ICC's efforts to apprehend fugitives in a range of situations, and we've worked to update our own sources of information in order to track their movements, many of whom have been at large for far too long. In the United States, we have a very unique tool to contribute to creating additional information to assist in apprehension efforts. This is our War Crimes Rewards Program. This program enables us to offer rewards for up to $5 million for information leading to the arrest, transfer, or conviction of individuals who've been designated into the program for war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide. The program seeks to encourage individuals who can be family members or other associates to come forward with information to help locate fugitives so they can face charges against them. So far, the program has been very successful. Since Congress first created this authority, we've paid out over $8 million in rewards and contributed to over 20 cases at the international level. When it comes to the ICC, Joseph Kony has been designated under our program since 2013, and we have ramped up our outreach efforts, which has already elicited valuable information. We continue to evaluate a number of other ICC situations in which offering rewards for the arrests of the remaining fugitives might help advance the ICC's efforts, and we expect to publicly announce additional designations in the near future. This topic was the subject of a side event earlier this week, co-hosted by France, Ecuador, and South Africa. Several key themes and lessons learned emerged. First, fugitive tracking requires a range of multidisciplinary tools, including open source information using modern technology and gathering information from the person's digital footprint, but also old-fashioned human intelligence. Several panelists discussed the importance of identifying a complete profile of the fugitive and his or her associates and mapping out their psychological, financial, and social elements of the person's patterns of life. Building strong relationships of trust with bilateral, multilateral, and international partners is essential when dealing with international crimes. Building these networks in advance of a transnational operation is critical so that the various actors can move quickly and in sync when the time presents itself. States must ensure that appropriate domestic legal framework is in place in order to advance and enable the necessary steps to effectuate an arrest and eventual transfer to the court. There have been several occasions, including when the United States discovered an accused genocidaire living in Texas, when states have lacked a legal framework to transfer an individual to an international court. This, of course, can lead to delays and legal challenges. We also learned that civil society and private actors can have unique access to information that might not be available to national or international authorities. For example, strong, trusted connections with diaspora communities. These can develop and generate important leads or linkage evidence. So building these public-private partnerships can be fruitful. And finally, we learned that there's an element of serendipity in this work. Sometimes small developments can suddenly open the door to major progress, especially if the necessary tools, relationships, legal authorities, and networks are already in place. We look forward to continuing to work with states parties and non-parties alike, along with other key stakeholders, on these and other cooperation issues, which are essential to supporting justice for atrocity crimes. Thank you for including us in this important and timely conversation.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for that contribution to our debate. I now give the floor to, under civil society, to the representative of Lawyers for Justice in Libya. Please do not exceed 2 minutes. Thank you.
Distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, it is an honor to stand before you today on behalf of Lawyers for Justice in Libya and partner organizations in Libya. This ASP takes place at a pivotal moment for the ICC's investigation into Libya. Last month, the prosecutor announced to the Security Council that his office aims to complete all investigative activities in relation to Libya by the end of 2025. The prosecutor failed to provide reasons to believe that his office would be able to complete the investigations within this time frame. The insufficient cooperation of the Libyan authorities with the ICC continues to hinder the progress of the investigations. As reported in the prosecutor's briefing, the metrics set by his office to measure successful cooperation with the Libyan authorities have not been met. This manifests in a number of areas, including the lack of efforts to facilitate the court's access to Libya, to provide all requested documents relevant to the investigations, and the execution of arrest warrants and the transfer of suspects. Moreover, the Libyan judiciary is unable and unwilling to genuinely investigate and prosecute perpetrators of serious international crimes. The Libyan authorities continue to impose a crackdown on civil society. Those who interact with the ICC are exposed to serious risks of reprisals from the militias affiliated to the Libyan authorities. In light of these elements, and in the context of meager, meaningful results achieved by the ICC to date, we call on the prosecutor to re-examine his plans to conclude the investigations by 2025 and to consult with relevant stakeholders, including civil society, in developing such plans as outlined in his roadmap presented to the Security Council in 2022. We urge state parties to provide the court with adequate resources, including budget increases, to enable the court to successfully accomplish its mission. We urge the court, as well as state parties, to demand genuine cooperation by the Libyan authorities, which should go beyond welcoming official visits.
Je vais vous demander de conclure, excusez-moi.
I'm going to ask you to conclude, if I may.
To secure the arrest and transfer of suspects to the court, enabling a safe and unselective access to victims and affected communities, and protecting and promoting civil society actors working towards accountability. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. That has brought us to the end of our speakers list. I have the pleasure of once again returning the floor to my Senegalese colleague to conclude this session. Thank you, Ambassador. Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, experts, panel members, we have listened closely and with great interest to your various statements on the crucial issue of arrests. I wish at this stage, in my own capacity, but also on behalf of Ambassador Alabrun and Ambassador Momargui, to thank you sincerely for your remarkable contributions to our work, given the fact that the Rome Statute does not allow to try someone accused randomly, providing justice, making sure the court is effective, and making sure that people that are suspects are apprehended by competent authorities. It's important to further the court. In order to achieve this goal, international cooperation is particularly important, not only in terms of countries that are directly concerned, but also by other states where fugitives can be located or move through. This task means that we must meet significant difficulties insofar as, beyond political, military or geostrategic concerns, fugitives often enjoy the complicity of others, which make attempts to arrest them more difficult. However, if we work together, tangible progress can be made here. Before I adjourn the plenary, allow me to thank you all for attending this meeting on cooperation. I wish to give a special commendation to the interpreters for their patience. I wish you to successfully continue this session of the ASP. Every success to you all. The meeting is adjourned.